The number one unsolved mystery in science today, or one might say the search for the ultimate truth in science today, is the quest to solve the mystery of the theory of everything. The search for the theory of everything today takes the form of theoretical physicists trying to mathematically unify gravity as it is described by general relativity with quantum mechanics into a single overarching mathematical theory that, in principle, would be capable of describing all the phenomena of the universe. To put it mildly, describing all the phenomena of the universe is a rather ambitious goal for any mere theory of science to hope to achieve. But be that as it may, for the last several decades, since at least the mid-1980s, the leading candidate for solving this hypothetical theory of everything has been the mathematical framework of string theory and/or M theory. Yet, string theory and/or M theory is now found to have severe problems that have rendered it untenable as a correct solution for that hypothetical mathematical theory of everything. As far back as 2001, Peter Woot, who is professor of mathematics at Columbia University, stated that string theory is not even wrong, and further questioned whether string theory really is a scientific theory at all. And at the end of the year 2020, Professor Woot, in reviewing that 2001 article, stated that rereading that article today, there's little I would change. Its argument is even more valid now than then. And he even goes on to state that the problems with string theory are far worse than what I could have imagined back then. Peter Woot is hardly alone. In the following video, Roger Penrose, who is certainly no lightweight in the field of theoretical physics, offered this rather scathing criticism of string theory and/or M theory. What is referred to as M theory isn't even a theory. It's a collection of ideas, hopes, aspirations. It's not even a theory. They are very far from any kind of observational evidence. Yes, the ideas of string theory and/or M theory, are hardly science. Likewise, theoretical physicist Sabine Hossenfelder, in her book entitled Lost in Math, is equally scathing of string theory and states, "These too good to not be true theories are actually untestable, and they have left the field in a cul-de-sac." In fact, as Hossenfelder pointed out in the following 2019 video, because the Large Hadron Collider has failed to detect any of the many particles that were predicted to exist by string theory via supersymmetry, then string theory should now rightly be classified as a highly dubious, if not an outright falsified scientific theory. In regards to supersymmetry itself, according to string theory, all particles in the universe can be divided into two types, bosons and fermions. String theory predicts that a type of connection called supersymmetry exists between these two particle types. Under supersymmetry, a fermion must exist for every boson and a boson for every fermion. Unfortunately, experiments have not yet detected these extra particles. And as the following 2019 article explains, if supersymmetry is the solution to the hierarchy problem, then the lightest superpartners should definitely be accessible by Large Hadron Collider. The fact that it hasn't found any thus far is enough to eliminate virtually all models of supersymmetry that solve the very problem it was designed to solve. Moreover, as the following 2021 article points out, after years of searching and loads of accumulated data from countless collisions, there is no sign of any supersymmetric particle. In fact, many supersymmetry models are now completely ruled out, and very few theoretical ideas remain valid. And the article even goes on to state that where will physics go from here in a universe without supersymmetry? Only time and a lot of math will tell. Thus, string theory, via the falsification of supersymmetric particles, is now found to be basically a mathematical fantasy with no detectable connection to the real world. In short, string theory, for all practical purposes, is dead as far as being a serious candidate for that hypothetical mathematical theory of everything. One of the major mathematical stumbling blocks for theoretical physicists in trying to find that hypothetical mathematical theory of everything has been the problem of quote-unquote renormalizing the infinities that crop up when one tries to mathematically unify quantum mechanics with general relativity. The first attempt at unifying relativity and quantum mechanics took place when special relativity was merged with electromagnetism. This created the theory of quantum electrodynamics, or a QED. After nearly 2 decades of work, it only became possible to unify special relativity and quantum mechanics when the infinite results between the two theories were dealt with by a procedure called renormalization, in which the infinities are rolled up into the electron's observed mass and charge, and thereafter conveniently ignored. Richard Feynman referred to this mathematical sleight of hand as brushing infinity under the rug. In the following video, Feynman rightly expresses his unease with brushing infinity under the rug and states, "Why should it take an infinite amount of logic to figure out what one stinky tiny bit of space-time is going to do?" Now, personally, I find it interesting that Richard Feynman, an atheist, would have been so bothered by brushing infinity under the rug. Because as for myself, being a Christian theist, I find it rather comforting to know that it takes an infinite amount of logic to figure out what one tiny bit of space-time is going to do. The reason why I find it rather comforting is because of the verse of John 1:1, which says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." Now, the word in John 1:1 is translated from logos in Greek. Logos also happens to be the root word from which we derive our modern word logic. So that it would take an infinite amount of logic to know what one tiny bit of space-time is going to do is pretty much exactly what I would have expected under my Christian presuppositions. In fact, I took a little deeper look at that specific line of thought in this following video. And although special relativity and quantum mechanics were, via the mathematical sleight of hand of renormalization, mathematically unified with one another in order to produce the very successful theory of quantum electrodynamics, a theory in which in which come all known electrical, mechanical, and chemical laws. That is to say, it's a theory with great explanatory power. In spite of that, no mathematical sleight of hand exists for unifying general relativity with quantum mechanics. Professor Jeremy Bernstein states the situation as such in regards to general relativity and quantum mechanics. There remains an irremediable difficulty. Every order reveals new types of infinities, and no finite number of renormalizations renders all the terms in the series finite. The theory is not renormalizable. And as the following theoretical physicist noted, you would need to add infinitely many counterterms in a never-ending process. Renormalization would fail. Moreover, it's not only that quantum mechanics and general relativity have this unbridgeable, infinite mathematical divide between them, it is also that, theoretically speaking, quantum mechanics and general relativity contradict each other to the point of literally blowing the entire universe apart. As Gregory Chaitin states, there are serious problems with the traditional view that the world is a space-time continuum. Quantum field theory and general relativity contradict each other. The notion of space-time breaks down at very small distances because extremely massive quantum fluctuations, virtual particle-antiparticle pairs, should provoke black holes, and space-time should be torn apart, which doesn't actually happen. Here are a few more references that drive this point about tearing the universe apart further home. And yet, despite the fact that both theories contradict each other to the point of literally blowing the universe apart, the fact remains that quantum mechanics and general relativity are both tested to extreme levels of precision, and thus we can, in spite of them contradicting each other, still be extremely confident both theories are, in fact, true mathematical descriptions of the universe. Moreover, since Gödel's incompleteness theorem for mathematics has now been extended into quantum physics itself, in that it is now proven that even a perfect and complete description of the microscopic properties of a material is not enough to predict its macroscopic behavior, and that the insurmountable difficulty lies precisely in the derivation of macroscopic properties from a microscopic description, then we can also be extremely confident that, mathematically speaking, the microscopic descriptions of quantum mechanics will never be successfully extended to account for the macroscopic descriptions of general relativity. In short, it is now proven that any hypothetical mathematical theory of everything that will unify quantum mechanics and general relativity will necessarily be an incomplete mathematical description of the universe. As the late Stanley Jockey noted, Gödel's proof that mathematics is incomplete means that all mathematical models, all theories of elementary particles, including the theory of quarks and gluons, fall inherently short of being that theory which shows, in virtue of its a priori truth, that the world can only be what it is and nothing else. Moreover, since Gödel's incompleteness theorem for mathematics can be succinctly summarized as such, anything you can draw a circle around cannot explain itself without referring to something outside the circle, something you have to assume but cannot prove. Since that is true, then it is fairly safe to assume that there must be something very powerful that must be outside the circle of the universe that is holding the universe together in order to keep it from blowing itself apart, as the combination of general relativity and quantum mechanics predict that it will. For the Christian, this theoretical finding from our very best theories in science that something very powerful must be outside the universe that is holding the universe together should not be all that surprising to find out. Christianity predicted that Christ himself is before all things, and in him all things hold together. And although general relativity and quantum mechanics contradict each other to the point of literally blowing the universe apart, it is interesting to note where they agree. Where they both agree is that both general relativity and quantum mechanics overturn the Copernican principle and or the principle of mediocrity. And yet, despite the fact that virtually everyone, including the vast majority of Christians, hold that the Copernican principle, or the principle of mediocrity, is unquestionably true, the fact of the matter is that the Copernican principle is now shown by both general relativity and quantum mechanics to be a false assumption. General relativity itself does not care if we choose the Earth or the Sun or any other place in the universe as the central point of our model for the universe. As George Ellis stated, I can construct you a spherically symmetrical universe with Earth at its center, and you cannot disprove it based on observation. You can only exclude it on philosophical grounds. Likewise, Stephen Hawking himself explained, our observations of the heavens can be explained by assuming either the Earth or the Sun to be at rest. The real advantage of the Copernican system is simply that the equations of motion are much simpler in the frame of reference in which the Sun is at rest. And Fred Hoyle stated, thus we cannot say that the Copernican theory is right and the Earth-centered model is wrong in any meaningful physical sense. Even Einstein himself stated that the two sentences, the Sun is at rest and the Earth moves, or the Sun moves and the Earth is at rest, would simply mean two different conventions concerning two different coordinate systems. There simply is no empirical reason to prefer the Sun or any other place in the universe as being central in the universe, over and above the Earth being considered central in the universe, and in any model that we are making of the universe. In fact, as far as empirical science itself is concerned, in the four-dimensional space-time of Einstein's general relativity, we find that each three-dimensional point in the universe is central to the expansion of the universe. And since any three-dimensional point can be considered central in the expanding four-dimensional space-time of general relativity, then, as the following article makes clear, it is now left completely open to whomever is making a model of the universe to decide for themselves what is to be considered central in the universe. In fact, since each three-dimensional point in the universe is central to the expansion of the universe, and since no matter where you stand, it will appear that everything in the universe is expanding around you, then even individual people themselves can be considered to be central in the universe. Moreover, when Einstein first formulated both special and general relativity, he gave a hypothetical observer a privileged frame of reference in which to make measurements in the universe. And whereas Einstein, when he first formulated both special and general relativity, gave a hypothetical observer a privileged frame of reference, in quantum mechanics we find that it is the measurement itself that gives each observer a privileged frame of reference in the universe. As the following article states, it proves that measurement is everything. At the quantum level, reality does not exist if you are not looking at it. Likewise, the following violation of Liggett's inequality stressed that the quantum mechanical assertion that reality does not exist when we're not observing, and that's confirmed. Moreover, this recent 2019 experimental confirmation of the Wigner's friend thought experiment established that measurement results must be understood relative to the observer who performed the measurement. Because of such repeatable experiments as this, and consistent experiments like this, Richard Conn Henry, who is a professor of physics at Johns Hopkins University, stated that it is more than 80 years since the discovery of quantum mechanics gave us the most fundamental insight ever into our nature, the overturning of the Copernican revolution, and the restoration of us human beings to centrality in the universe. Now, personally, I find it extremely interesting and strange that quantum mechanics tells us that instantaneous quantum wave collapse to its three-dimensional state is centered on each individual observer in the universe. And I also find it interesting that the four-dimensional space-time cosmology of general relativity tells us that each three-dimensional point in the universe is central to the expansion of the universe. These findings of modern science are pretty much exactly what we would expect to see if this universe were indeed created and sustained from a higher dimension by an omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent, eternal being who knows everything that is happening everywhere in the universe at the same time. These findings certainly seem to go to the very heart of the age-old question asked of many parents by their children. How can God hear everybody's prayers at the same time? In other words, why should the expansion of the universe, or the quantum wave collapse of the entire universe, even care that you or I or anyone else should exist? Only theism offers a rational explanation as to why you or I or anyone else should have such undeserved significance in such a vast universe. To go further, and also completely contrary to the Copernican principle and or the principle of mediocrity, in quantum mechanics we also now found that humans, via their free will, are brought into the laws of nature at their most fundamental level. As Steven Weinberg, who is an atheist himself, states in the following article. In the instrumentalist approach in quantum mechanics, humans are brought into the laws of nature at the most fundamental level. The instrumentalist approach turns it back on a vision that became possible after Darwin of a world governed by impersonal physical laws that control human behavior along with everything else. In quantum mechanics, these probabilities do not exist until people choose what to measure. Unlike the case of classical physics, a choice must be made. In fact, Steven Weinberg, again, who is an atheist, rejected the instrumentalist approach precisely because humans are brought into the laws of nature at the most fundamental level, and precisely because it undermined the Darwinian worldview from within. Yet, regardless of how he and other atheists may prefer the world to behave, quantum mechanics itself could care less how atheists prefer the world to behave. As leading experimentalist Anton Zeilinger states in the following video, what we perceive as reality now depends on our earlier decision what to measure, which is a very, very deep message about the nature of reality and our part in the whole universe. We are not just passive observers. As well, in the field of quantum computing, with what is termed contextuality, we find that in the quantum world, the property that you discover through measurement is not the property that the system actually had prior to the measurement process. What you observe necessarily depends on how you carried out the observation. Moreover, although there have been several major loopholes in quantum mechanics over the past several decades that atheists have tried to appeal to in order to try to avoid the quote-unquote spooky theistic implications of quantum mechanics, over the past several years, each of those major loopholes that have been postulated have been each closed one by one. The last major loophole that was left to be closed was the setting independence and or the free will loophole. But now Anton Zeilinger and company have recently, as of 2018, pushed the free will loophole back to 7.8 billion years ago, thereby firmly establishing the common sense fact that the free will choices of the experimenter in these quantum experiments are truly free, and that their choices are not determined by any possible causal influences from the past for at least the past 7.8 billion years, and that therefore the experimenters themselves are therefore shown to be truly free to choose whatever measurement settings in the experiments that he or she may so desire to choose, so that they may logically probe whatever aspect of reality that he or she may be interested in probing. Thus, regardless of how Steven Weinberg and other atheists may prefer the universe to behave, with the closing of the last remaining free will loophole in quantum mechanics, humans are indeed brought into the laws of nature at their most fundamental level, and thus these recent findings from quantum mechanics directly undermine, as Weinberg himself honestly admitted, the vision that became possible after Darwin of a world governed by impersonal physical laws that control human behavior along with everything else. Moreover, with human observers, via their free will, being brought into laws of physics at their most fundamental level, then it now becomes at least theoretically possible for God, through His Son Jesus Christ, to bridge the infinite mathematical divide that exists between general relativity and quantum mechanics. Dr. William Dembski, in the following comment, although he was not directly addressing the infinite mathematical divide that exists between general relativity and quantum mechanics, offers this insight into what the unification of infinite God with finite man might look like, mathematically speaking. The cross is a path of humility in which the infinite God becomes finite and then contracts to zero, only to resurrect and thereby unite a finite humanity within a newfound infinity. Moreover, when we rightly allow the agent causality of God back into physics, as the Christian founders of modern science originally envisioned, and as quantum mechanics itself now empirically demands with the closing of the free will loophole by Anton Zeilinger and company, then that provides us with a very plausible resolution for the much sought after theory of everything, and that Christ's resurrection from the dead provides an empirically backed reconciliation via the Shroud of Turin between quantum mechanics and general relativity into the much sought after theory of everything. The Shroud of Turin is by far the most scientifically scrutinized ancient artifact of man. Here is a website that lists many of the scientific papers and articles that have been written about the Shroud of Turin over the years. You can see it is a lengthy list. In regards to gravity itself being dealt with on the Shroud of Turin, the following article states that the bottom part of the cloth containing the dorsal image would have borne all the weight of the man's supine body, yet the dorsal image is not encoded with a greater amount of intensity than the frontal image. And in the following video, Isabel Pichat states that the muscles of the body are absolutely not crushed against the stone of the tomb. They are perfect. It means the body is hovering between the two sides of the shroud. What does that mean? It means there is absolutely no gravity. And Kevin Moran, who is an optical engineer, describes the shroud image in this way. The unique front and back only image can be best described as gravitationally collimated. The radiation that made the image acted perfectly parallel to gravity. There is no side image. The radiation is parallel to gravity. Moreover, besides gravity being dealt with on the Shroud of Turin, the shroud also gives us evidence that quantum mechanics itself was dealt with. In the following paper, it was found that it was not possible to describe the image formation on the shroud in classical terms, but they found it necessary to describe the formation of the image on the shroud in discrete quantum terms. Moreover, the following rather astonishing study on the shroud found that it would take 34 trillion watts of what is termed VUV directional radiation to form the image on the shroud. So thus, in conclusion, when we rightly allow the agent causality of God back into physics, as the Christian founders of modern science originally envisioned, then a very plausible solution to the number one unsolved mystery in science today of finding a reconciliation between general relativity and quantum mechanics rarely pops out for us, in that, as the Shroud of Turin itself gives witness to, both gravity and quantum mechanics were dealt with in Christ's resurrection from the dead. I think personally that the Christian founders of modern science, who very much viewed their work in science as a way of worshiping God, would be very pleased to learn about this recent development in science. Well, that's the end of the video. Thank you for watching it. And again, all videos and articles that I have referenced in this video may be accessed in the link that is provided in the video description. Thanks again for watching.